For those that are unaware, there's been a major fallout between Ric Flair and Jim Ross. And I consider these two the greatest announcer and greatest wrestler of all time. And of course, they go way back. Here you see Jim Ross and Ric Flair in the Jim Crockett promotion era. And more of the same here. Again, two of the best in the business. And it's sad that they've known each other for so long. And they had this falling out. And when it comes to announcers, again, Jim Ross, I hold him in the same league as Gorilla Monsoon, as you see here, and Bobby Heenan as the best announcers of all time. But nonetheless, this controversy between these two, specifically when it comes to Ric Flair, who has a major beef with Jim Ross, it all stems from this episode from Dark Side of the Ring regarding the infamous 2002 plane ride from hell from Great Britain to the U.S., and there's a lot of things that took place during this flight, of course, as we all know. And also, before playing that clip from Dark Side of the Ring, in a conversation with Jim Ross and Conrad Thompson, the topic of 1991 WCW wrestling is mentioned. And of course, Jim Herd as the executive vice president. And basically, Jim Ross takes shots at Ric Flair without mentioning his name, talking about those that can't get over the past, can't get over what happened back in 1991. And definitely, in my estimation, he's talking about Ric Flair. Let's take a listen to what Jim Ross says here.
I'm pretty proud of it. A really nice interview with Jim Herd for the first time in decades over at adfreeshows.com.
It's excellent.
Thank you.
Highly recommend it, Conrad. And I know the guy probably about as well as anybody. Some guys still hate the guy, and I find that unhealthy.
Yeah, I agree.
You're shitting me. You hate a guy that you hadn't worked with in
30
decades.
Years. 30 years.
Yeah. And is that what you got stored in your head? You're carrying that shit around? Okay. Well, to each his own.
And I'm sure there'll be some that will say Jim Ross is not referring to Ric Flair, but obviously Ric Flair has been the most vocal when it comes to Jim Herd. Now let's take a listen to what actually Ric Flair has to say regarding Jim Ross. I mean, he literally buries Jim Ross in this interview with Conrad Thompson, and it gets pretty ugly. Ric Flair does not hold back whatsoever. Let's play the clip. I'll play it throughout, but I'll interrupt only when necessary. Let's take a listen.
Jim Ross lost every bit of credibility with me in life, in spite of calling me the greatest wrestler of all time, or whatever, induction and all the bullshit, when he jumped on the dark side of wrestling. Because all he is starving for and leaning on life is to be relevant. Because he ain't. And I will tell you this. What disappoints me the most, and this is a very serious statement. When Russo and, what was his buddy's name?
Ed Ferrara.
When they mocked up Jim Ross and made fun of the Bell's palsy, I thought it was the worst thing I've ever seen in wrestling in my life. Forget anything that I ever went through personally. It was the worst thing, and it's unforgivable. Unforgivable to make fun of of a situation like that, which was, I can only imagine what it did to Jim's mind. So I can forgive Jim Ross for Dark Side of Wrestling, which I have, because there's nothing worth it. But I don't appreciate it. Jerry Lawler texted me. I don't know how many people said, "What the fuck does Ross mean? You got to know when to walk away from Ric Flair."
Now I'm going to pause right there, and that definitely gets to the topic of the episode, again, of Dark Side of the Ring and Jim Ross's comments. And let's play that right now. And before actually playing that clip, Ric Flair did mention as well Jerry Lawler. And I'm not sure if Jerry Lawler would appreciate Ric Flair mentioning that text he sent to him, which obviously would have potentially create a divide between Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross. And that's just Ric Flair, playing maybe dirty pool in a bit, bringing up a personal text from obviously Jerry Lawler regarding Jim Ross and what he stated. And obviously Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler being not only longtime co-workers with WWE, but longtime friends as well. Now let's take a listen to, again, what created this controversy on Ric Flair's side of it regarding Jim Ross and the plane ride from hell, which of course Ric Flair was a major part of. And this is really what it comes down to, with Ric Flair having serious issues with Jim Ross. Let's take a listen.
How does it that Ric Flair evaded any sort of suspension or anything like that?
Good question. I guess, for lack of a better term, he was a made man. And he was such a high-level made man that he got a pass. He's the life of the party. And if you know him, you know where to exit the party and go to your own safe place, or you don't know the rules and you find yourself in deep water.
And let's continue on and take a listen to what Ric Flair has to say regarding this whole situation with Jim Ross.
Well, the WWE learned when to walk away from Jim Ross. I'm going to the 30th edition, 30th reunion. You think he is?
Well, he's under contract somewhere else, so probably not.
You think he's getting invited?
I mean, I don't think it would be possible, but no, to answer your question.
Okay. Well, I was under contract at TNA and got my second ring. So if they want things to happen, I make them happen.
Yeah. I didn't know
it's another podcast. You didn't hear what he said about me and Darkseid?
Well, in fairness, I think there's more to that story. And I don't know that you and Jim have ever talked about that, but
Tell me. Let's discuss
Jim
it.
believes it was creative editing and that it was a gotcha moment. And I know that Jim didn't want to record again or do anything with the Tales from the Territory guys again, or the Dark Side of the Ring. And I actually tried to placate and say, well, listen, Tales from the Territories is a different thing. And it's not going to be about negative stories. It's going to be fun, easy stories. It's talking about Mid-South.
Yeah, but what's that got to do with me?
No, I'm with you. I'm just saying Jim was upset with the way it came out because he says it wasn't that wasn't an accurate portrayal of the conversation.
You know what he said to me when I called him on it? He said, I love you, Nate. Always have, always will.
What's wrong with that?
I said, what the fuck are you doing? That was his answer. Not, hey, I'm sorry. And I'll tell you something else. You know, going back to these documentaries and how they can be hurtful.
Yeah.
When Jim Ross is talking about me dancing on the table and drinking and all that shit, but forgot to pay the IRS. You know why he knows about the IRS? Because he was the head of talent relations.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be private when they garnished my wages. So you ask me what I think about Jim Ross. I have felt the pain of Jan like nobody else. I was there when he met Jan. So I know a lot of things a lot of people don't know. But shitting on me is not cool.
Well, I hate you feel that way. I know that
go back and read it. Pull it up. How would you feel? How would you feel if he said it about you?
I'm with you, but again, and I feel like we're talking in circles here. I just want to make sure you understand. Jim says that's creative editing. That it was the way it was presented on TV is not the way it went down, and he was uncomfortable working with them in the future. And of course, I think they've smoothed all that out. But there were a lot of people who felt like, man, that's not really what I said. And
did they smooth out the $500,000 I lost?
Well, I guess the question is, you blame Jim Ross, not necessarily the editors of the show. We've never discussed that. I'm just asking.
Well, first of all, why did he say it? Why is he on the show? And you know what? You know how many people have called me and said, "We'd love to say something, but we don't want to hear something about ourselves."
Right.
How many phone calls do you think I got that for a year?
A lot.
Yeah. Rick, God, hey man, I'd say something about fuck. I don't want him jumping on me.
Yeah.
So a convicted felon, in trouble with the IRS, arrested for domestic violence twice, get to say shit about me 22 years later. I lose $500,000. It almost causes me to get divorced. You don't think I hit Wendy and her kids? What do you think my grandkids thought of that? Well, hey, you're part of the family. What do you think? What do you think? You don't think that runs through my mind every day?
Sure.
To this day, it runs through my mind. Jericho telling me he knew nothing about it. Yet he's the editor, director.
So, two things to take from this so far. Obviously, Conrad Thompson's trying to play the peacemaker. I'm sure, obviously, doing shows with Jim Ross and trying to smooth things out. It's not working out. And also, Ric Flair mentions Chris Jericho. And that's unfortunate because, obviously, Chris Jericho and Ric Flair have been on good terms. Actually, I enjoyed Ric Flair's podcast with Chris Jericho on Talk is Jericho. But nonetheless, we'll continue on here. But this is all bad. And this is unfortunate. Basically the last years of Ric Flair and making enemies with everybody around him. And I'm not saying it's his fault, but definitely this is not the best scenario with all these big-time players in the wrestling industry. Jim Ross, Ric Flair, now Chris Jericho being dragged into this, as well as the editor, of course, the narrator of the show itself, The Dark Side of the Ring. Let's continue on here with Ric Flair.
I know what you mean. I think he's up to do something.
They're all fucking lucky that I'm a better man. Because I got the story on all of them. I just don't tell it. I could have this fucking podcast breaking every record. We'd be running numbers like NFL football. If I tried to tell them stories.
Yeah, I'm in an awkward spot here, man. Who else do you want to fuck with today? It's their shit list.
No. Well, you keep bringing the names up. I just got an answer for you.
Well, I was asking about Johnny Ace and Jim Ross, and boy, we took a hard left turn there. But
well, because I don't know how Jim Ross could be hot at anybody. Jim used to walk around to just basically beat Vince's brains out. At the same time, Jim Ross will always be my favorite announcer. I'm not diminishing his skills. I'm not like Eric saying I was no good at anything. I'm telling you, Jim was the fucking best. But I also thought he was one of my best friends.
It hurts.
A friend doesn't do that. Yeah. Jim Ross he and Gordon Soley and Oakland in all different styles are the three greatest announcers of all fucking time.
We agree.
In all my 70 years of watching it, seeing it, from Marty O'Neill, name it. Those three are the three greatest. All different styles. But Jim Ross I have so much respect for him. I wanted him to have that equal amount of respect for me in real life. He didn't.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I think he does. I think it's a misunderstanding.
Well, doesn't matter. It's over now.
Pretty sad situation with Ric Flair and Jim Ross. Conrad Thompson, of course, doing shows with also Jim Ross, trying to smooth things out to no avail. And also Chris Jericho, mentioned by Ric Flair, claiming he has a lot of dirt on these people that he doesn't divulge. But nonetheless, sad situation, like I said. Ric Flair with Jim Ross, all these older photos, and more recently, and all down the drain, unfortunately, over this documentary, Dark Side of the Ring, and specifically the plane ride from hell.